unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hello and welcome and happy Monday. Here is what you're going to learn by the end of tonight's last show. Even though it's not the last show, we'll be here tomorrow. I mean, it is the last show in the sense that the show is named that, but it's not the last show in the sense that we will be back tomorrow. Is that clear? I'll stop talking. No, I won't, but I'll tell you about tonight's program. Is corporate loyalty dead? A memo from the CEO of large company AT&T said the quiet part out loud. He said in no uncertain terms, that company is moving from a loyalty-based approach to a more market-based culture. But who killed this deal that seemed to once exist between worker and employer? Loyalty. And what replaces it? And if companies won't be loyal to you, should workers be loyal to them? That we'll explore in about 10 minutes' time. After that, it's relationships without labels, situationships. We're going to unpack them, the hope, the mixed signals, and the reasons why people stay in them. Halfway through the hour, a recent study on situationships. What helps, what hurts, and how to decide where one is going. We got more action on tonight's show. That's just some of it. For now, let's jump in.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
And in large language models, ChatGPT directing otherwise sane people to take weird chemicals, which then causes them to have psychosis news. We are joined by foreign correspondent Tony Five, reporting live at the scene of his apartment, talking about a story that happened at the University of Washington. Tony, welcome to the show.
David. When I was young, we would say stuff like, my dog ate the homework, and you'd copy off your friends. You know, you'd get a mate who was a bit nerdy and he'd do your homework for you. Nowadays, my friend, it's all about the chat BPT.
Yes, BGC.
Bee Gees. I used to love the Bee Gees, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. They're okay. With the falsetto voices.
They used to have really nice voices.
The Brothers Gibb, is that who that is?
The Brothers Gibb, indeed. The chat GP Gibb.
Got it. Okay, well, back to this story. A 60-year-old man, it doesn't exactly say where he lived, but it was written up by the University of Washington, some professors there.
Yeah.
He was studying nutrition in college, so this guy should have known better, but he went to ChatGPT to seek health advice.
Yeah, well, he's 60, like we said, and he's probably, he's gone later life, mature student, wanted to study nutrition, has a disdain for salt, David, table salt, didn't really like it. Thought he'd ask ChatGPT, what can I do instead of table salt, to flavor my food? And obviously, we all know salt, sodium chloride. Is that right?
Do we all know that?
Well, I mean, most of us do. Yeah, I mean, I got that group on from chemistry about 4 years ago, and I believe it is sodium chloride. That's right.
I think you're right there. So this guy trying to lower, I guess, chlorine in his diet, or he thought he could cheat. Maybe he had like high, whatever, heart problems.
Blood pressure. Yeah, blood pressure, cholesterol. Yeah.
So he's like, well, what can I do? I like salt. It's tasty. So ChatGPT's like, hey, why don't you take this alternative called sodium bromide? That seems like a great idea. Weeks later, he shows up at his local emergency room like nuts. He says his neighbor's trying to poison him. He says he's thirsty, but he won't accept water. He starts screaming, paranoid, like delusions, psychosis.
And a full-on psychosis. What it seems to me is, have you ever done that thing when you say melon schmelon? So like ChatGPT has gone chloride, bromide. It's all the same to me.
I guess this is 1 point for the robots not being quite ready to take over the world.
But I mean, bromide is really dangerous. Yeah, it's the equivalent of like sort of chewing on a battery type thing for him. He just couldn't calm down. They used to use it, weirdly enough, in the 19th century psych wards.
Yeah, but that would just keep the patients there. Anyway, this guy had to be on a psychiatric hold. He was hallucinating. He was paranoid. Yeah. He was not doing well at all. So they start doing all these tests. They realize he's on bromide. He's like not cooperating. But they have to hold him for like 3 weeks for it to exit his system. This could have been completely preventable. But no, ChatGPT told him take the bromine or bromide or whatever.
Bromide.
And well, isn't bromine the drug and bromide is okay, not important. But yeah, they hold him. Eventually it gets out of his system. And then he starts telling the doctors back when he's sane how it all happened. And he disclosed that ChatGPT told him to add sodium bromine
On his steaks.
on his steaks or whatever. And yeah, I think it just goes to show, don't believe what the large language models tell you. Like, especially if they've come up with an amazing novel idea to beat salt or whatever it is. Like, if you need to ask it a question and the answer seems a little bit too good to be true, you maybe want to just Google that answer, make sure it's correct.
But then aren't you going from one sort of ridiculous model to another? You can go from like ChatGPT, go to Google, and Google will say, yeah, try arsenic.
Well, you want to go to the primary sources. I mean, Google is like going to give you links to people who actually wrote things, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah.
I mean, who knows what's going on with the internet now? You can't trust whether anything was written by a person or not, but that's a conversation for another day. I'm just saying, if ChatGPT's like, I want to fly without airplanes, and like, well, you should try jumping off a bridge. I just mean, you want to get a second source. That's all I'm saying.
Well, look, related question, right? Who is responsible for that? Let's just say, God forbid, something happened to this guy, right? Now, if you bought something from Amazon, you can go all the way up to Jeff Beijing, or Microsoft, you could go to Steve Banks. But now, what would happen? Like, is there any comeback? I was thinking about that. We've had a couple of stories where ChatGPT's kind of got off the rails. Is there any sort of responsibility?
I don't know. Like, if you take out a book that has wild things in it, can you sue the library? If you search for results on Google and the first link you click is really out there and causes you to do something dangerous, is Google liable? The answer is we don't know.
Well, the website author is, yeah, because like there are obviously websites that show you how to do some horrible things, making bombs, blah, blah, blah. But then they can be prosecuted because obviously the distribution of sort of...
Can they?
You know, like bad material. Well, in the UK, you can try to. But what I'm saying is, like, who is ultimately responsible for ChatGPT? Technically, it's all of us, because it's all of us that are putting this information in this large language model, right? So I'm to blame for that sodium bromide just as much as you are.
Maybe. I mean, if you get in a car that is self-driving and a horrific accident happens,
yes.
Who's responsible? Is it Uber or whatever self-driving car company that exists, like Waymo or whatever it's called? Is it their fault? Is it the engineer who programmed the AI driving model's fault?
And I'm surprised this conversation, I've not heard it. Like, I've never heard it. I've heard about all the horrors of it, you know, if it crashes, but I've never heard of who's responsible. And you guys live in that litigation sort of world, whereas we don't here in the UK. We kind of just make a cup of tea if you've killed someone. We might give you a little bit of cake, job done. But you guys will sue people for like billions and stuff. So who do you sue?
I don't know. I don't know if there's been cases like this in the courts yet. I imagine if there hasn't been, there's going to be. And I guess you'll have your answers in a few years, Tony. Is that...
David, have we got our finger on the pulse? Is this what it feels like to be current?
It might be. But back to this story, this guy, what I loved is he checked himself into the hospital with all these psychotic delusions, and then he tried to escape, which, you know, you always got to hand it to people.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't want to just do it the easy way.
It was only then that they put a psychiatric hold on him. I love the idea that you can go in, be on a psychiatric hold, be institutionalized because of a chemical in your body, and then 3 weeks later be totally sane again. This is actually an argument for bromine because it sounds like it's a wild ride.
I mean, he had a 3-week vacation. It's like you and Burning Man.
Yeah, which is where I'm going next week. Something we'll chat about soon. Tony, do we have our pulse on what's going on in the legal system with suing large language models? The truth is I don't actually know because there may be court cases.
Well, I think we should sort of maybe buy the website www.suechatgpt.com and maybe, you know, we could make a killing on that.
We certainly could. Tony Five, foreign correspondent in London, England. What a pleasure it is, as always, having you on the show. Tony, do not take sodium bromide.
David, I need to go through my ChatGPT history and all the questions I've asked it just to double check the answers. It did tell me to put a ladder out my window if I need to go downstairs in a hurry. I have got a pair of stairs, but you said this was in a better way.
Yeah. Don't trust the robots yet, I guess is the advice.
Our overlords.
I, for one, welcome them. Coming up next, a viral memo from the CEO of AT&T saying corporate loyalty to their employees is dead. What do employees and employers owe each other in today's market? After that blunt note, I think we have to redraft that contract. So that is what we'll explore on the other side of the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
In the 70s, 4 young women were found dead. For nearly 50 years, their cases went cold. I'm Nancy Hixt, a senior crime reporter for Global News. In the season finale of Crime Beat, I share how investigators uncovered shocking evidence of a serial killer and hear exclusive interviews with the killer's family. Listen to the full season of Crime Beat early and ad-free on Amazon Music by asking Alexa to play the podcast Crime Beat.
Taste the forbidden fruit of knowledge. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Don't you love it when ultra-wealthy CEOs say the quiet part out loud? A memo from the CEO of AT&T declares workplace loyalty between worker and the employer is dead. But was it ever more than a myth? And what exactly do employers and longtime employees owe each other? That is what we'll discuss here with someone who recently wrote on this. She's a chief correspondent at Business Insider. Her name is Aki Ito. Aki, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
So you argue that workplace loyalty is dead. It's not just that the CEO has said this, but was it ever real? I guess is my first question. There's often this portrait painted of the 1950s, 1960s, where people never job hopped, where people were really loyal to their employer. But was this a story? Is it more about pensions? Talk me through what workplace loyalty was before kind of writing this story.
Sure, yeah. And that's a great question because I actually have a lot of young people say to me, workplace loyalty was never a thing. That was always this an invention of capitalism, and people were stupid to believe in that even 30 years ago. But I actually argue that it was real. And let me give you a few pieces of evidence to back me up.
Please do.
Yeah. So when you look at workplace surveys back in, let's say 50s, 60s, at least the early parts of the 1970s, when you specifically ask white collar managers about how they felt about their jobs, the job satisfaction scores are just crazy. They're so high. It's really hard to imagine scores like that today. And specifically when you ask about their job security, they all say it's almost 100%. They feel so secure in their jobs. And there's a reason for that. And here we're only talking about the white collar professionals here. We're not talking about blue collar workers in the factories. But if you ask white collar managers, if you think about them at companies like GE or AT&T, for example, it was incredibly rare for these white collar managers to get fired for pretty much any reason. You had to do something really, really, really bad to get fired. Even if you weren't doing a great job, maybe you'd get shuffled into a different department. Even blue collar workers at this time at companies like Kodak, for example, that were famous for being really, really loyal to their employees, they would wait months, maybe even years to roll out new technology to make sure that their workers would have something else to do when that new technology came online. So this really was a period when companies did feel really loyal to their employees. You hear what CEOs said at the time, and they really considered their employees as kind of like a family, and it really wasn't just about pensions. It really was this, kind of totality of the attitude that CEOs had towards their employees that obviously doesn't exist anymore.
I'm willing to concede to your point because you made a good one, although I do question how much of this self-reporting by these employees was because of cultural narratives versus how companies behaved. But it sounds like companies did behave better and more loyal to their employees back then. If we assume that was the case, who broke this psychological contract? Why do things feel so different now?
So I argue that companies were the ones that broke it first. Starting in the 80s, companies started doing a lot more layoffs. There was this new management philosophy that spread throughout corporate America that really prioritized shareholder value over everything else, over, your obligations to employees, over sometimes even your obligations to customers. And so as a result, companies started laying off even their white collar managers, which was a really new thing at the time. And this idea of job security disappeared. In addition to that, obviously companies got rid of pensions. They cut a lot of other benefits as well. well. And the more companies were less loyal to their employees, of course, employees are going to respond and be a little less loyal to their employers as well. So this, whole idea of job hopping, that idea becomes much more mainstream. Today I feel like we've gotten to a place where it's just like a race to the bottom, right? Like employers become less loyal to employees, then employees become less loyal to employers. And then because of that, employers become even less loyal to their employees. And yeah, it's kind of sad. I think that's the root of the dysfunction in the modern corporate workplace that we see here.
Do big, large profit maximizing management consultant firms, are they to blame? Like I'm thinking McKinsey, which those in the know will know what they do. Those who don't will never heard of them. But companies hiring on firms to kind of just figure out where they can cut costs. And it doesn't matter if people get caught in the crossfire there.
I mean, consultants are certainly like, one of the forces, I think. But, the root of it is probably more of like an intellectual change among like the C-suite types. And I think the root of that is Milton Friedman. He was like an economist who was very pro-market. And when he was starting to distribute his ideas, I think back in the 70s, they were considered really fringe. Like nobody really listened to it. But I think it coincided with like the globalization of the economy, where American businesses just felt a lot less competitive as Japanese businesses, for example, were rising ascendant. And so American CEOs became a lot more cutthroat. And as a way to try to compete in the global economy, they became less loyal to their employees.
Does any loyalty live at all in companies today? Like I'm thinking of my friends who work in large corporations, and it's really their immediate work community, like the people on their team. They feel loyal to like Joe employee who's sitting next to them. And that's like what they feel loyal to, not the company, not the managers, not like the team next door. Is that loyalty still there, or is there really no loyalty in the workplace at all these days?
I think there is, depending on like, what kind of company you're at, and also depending on who you are. In response to the story, like I had a lot of people write in and be like, loyalty's been dead for like 30 years, like that you don't see it anywhere. But then I also had a lot of people say, I still feel really loyal to my employer because my employer is great to me. We're not like these big companies like AT&T. We're a small business, and I've worked for my company for 20 years, and I can't imagine them like ever trying to lay me off. My CEO treats me really well. My CEO knows who I am. And so I think it certainly does exist in certain corners of the economy. It just, you definitely don't see it as much as you did back 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Is this the new normal and people should expect to change jobs many times and not be loyal to their employers? Like anyone, I don't know, newly graduated or just entering the workforce? Or do you think things will get better or worse, stay the same?
It's tricky. Like, I don't want to like actually give that advice of like, don't be loyal at all. Because once again, I think that just leads to like a race to the bottom. I think there's something really wonderful about like believing in something that's bigger than yourself, believing in the power of like coming together with a group of people and achieving something that you couldn't do alone. That's, one of the things that I think makes work meaningful for a lot of people. But obviously, you want to put in that kind of work. You want to make those kinds of sacrifices for an employer that's actually going to give that loyalty back to you, right? And loyalty doesn't necessarily have to mean like lifetime job security. I don't think that really could exist in today's modern economy. But I think it could mean other things. Like, I think it could mean like, at least like being treated with respect and decency from your executives, which, AT&T CEO in this memo showed very little of. I think it means even when times are tough, like to not resort to layoffs as the first option, which so many employers seem to do, to really resort to them as the last option. I think it means, CEOs and executives being really transparent with their employees, not treating them like children, but like trusting that they'll take even difficult messages well. I think it could mean a lot of things, but we need to, I think, redefine probably what that loyalty is in today's modern economy. And until employers and employees can kind of come together and come to a shared understanding of what those mutual obligations are, I think we're going to continue to see this really dysfunctional state of work that we see today.
The piece is called Loyalty is Dead. You can read that in Business Insider. Aki Ito is a chief correspondent there. Aki, thanks for talking to me today. I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Up next, why do so many people find themselves in romantic situationships? Are they fulfilling? And why is adding definitions to who you're dating so difficult? I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show. We'll be back in a minute.
This is your invitation to a journey where relationships are dissected, science is simplified, and the news is hilariously twisted. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Situationships, more than friends, sexy at times, but less than defined. They offer connection without clarity. They mix intimacy with uncertainty. New research explores why people stay in them. Are emotional needs met? How much time do people invest? And is there that hope that maybe becomes more? But the question, when does existing in the in-between in a situationship help you, and when does it hurt you? That is what we'll discuss with Assistant Professor of Child and Family Studies at Baylor University, Dr. Mickey Langlais. Mickey, welcome to the show.
Hey, David, thanks for having me.
I just did a sort of nebulous, unclear definition of a situationship, and maybe you can't give me a more clear one. But for listeners new to the term, what exactly is a situationship, and how's it different from, I don't know, casual dating, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like defining something that's undefinable. It's that sort of construct, right? Yeah, no, situationships are people that essentially behave and act as if they're in a relationship without using that label. And they kind of just avoid that conversation about what are we. It's a little bit different from casual dating, right? Because casual dating, you can essentially hook up. You might even be very blunt about the purpose of that relationship, but it's a lot more open. And in some cases, situationships seem to be a lot more closed.
In modern dating, could it be that people just want certain needs met by others and their relationship is just not structured like a traditional one and it's kind of working for them, but you might call it a situationship, but for them it's kind of the structure they want? Is that what we're talking about here? Or are we talking about people who want to be committed but just can't or don't, or the person that they're dating won't?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because situationships just became more popular over like the last 5 years or so. My research team and I have been studying situationships for 3 years or so, and it's been really interesting just to see how common this term has come over time. And we're wondering if it's just, traditionally, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. People used to ask each other out or like, hey, let me get your phone number, let me get your Snapchat, or wherever people have those conversations. And I think people are maybe have an intense fear of rejection. There's more social anxiety. So situationships might be a safer route to try to form a relationship. Like, hey, let's just start acting like a couple. Let's just assume that you're not talking to anybody else and I'm not talking to anybody else. And let's just kind of keep this safe. But there are some people that life is too busy logistically, like we just don't have quote unquote time for a traditional relationship. So this situationship is fine for now. It's better than being alone. And it's better than the stressors that come with being in a relationship. But I am curious to know about if you know people who've been in situationships, if they relate to any of those experiences.
Well, I think there's two classes here. There's people like the thought that they would move in together, get married, get any more serious than they are. They would never do it. And both that structure works for them. And that's the kind of relationship they want. And I think it's unfair to say they're in a situationship. But then there's people that are being strung along or stringing along, and their default would be to be deeply committed, but they just can't or won't, or the person they're dating won't give them that. So I kind of see it in like two classes. Let's talk about the second one. Let's talk about the people whose default would be a committed relationship but aren't in that. Yes, of course, yeah. I know people like that. I know several people like that. I'm a millennial. I'm 39. I feel like that's half my friends these days.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people that would want, and even in the research that we're talking about, most of the people that we talk to kind of assume that this would either transition into a relationship or essentially was a relationship without having that term, like the definition. They acted like a couple. They engaged in, very intimate behaviors with each other. They went on dates and they did all these things, and people, it's interesting because people wouldn't necessarily like, oh, here's my situationship partner, but they'd say, hey, here's someone that I'm, here's this person I'm hanging out with, and that sort of thing. So I think how they talk about it might be a little bit different. But you brought up an interesting point, like, is someone just kind of being strung along? I get that question a lot when it comes to this research. Is this some form of unrequited love? And it really depends on the person. And a lot of the people we've studied have been predominantly female. And so that's why next month, actually, we've already got permission to study men in situationships, because there's generally this idea that men might be pursuing situationships differently than women. But that assumes that there's a huge gender difference, and we can't necessarily know that without research.
So how do people end up in situations like this?
Yeah, I honestly think it's just people not necessarily knowing how to start a relationship. They just start hanging out together, and they enjoy hanging out together, and they start acting like a couple. And then they just don't bring up this "what are we" conversation, because it might be anxiety producing. It might be, people don't want to get rejected. As a millennial, it's the same as you, although I look, twice your age.
Come on.
I feel like, but people just, maybe we're overprotective of our egos. If someone's like, hey, what are we? Are we going to be a couple? That person says no. I just invested a whole year in this quote unquote situationship for nothing. Now I need to move on. Or what if someone's like, no, I thought we were keeping this open. I think people are potentially, and that's what some of the participants are saying in our study too. Like, hey, I think I just feel safer not having that conversation and just holding the status quo.
There's something so human about avoiding putting yourself out there to avoid rejection, but by not putting yourself out there, you can't get a yes. You can't end up in a committed, stable relationship in this case. Are people happy in them? Are people getting their needs met? Are they getting their needs met?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. We did a study a couple years ago, just did a basic study where we were looking at people who weren't in situationships and those people who were. And we basically just tested to see if who was happier in those two groups. And those people who are in situationships rated themselves as less satisfied. And so that got us thinking, like, well, why are people pursuing these unsatisfying relationships? And so that's why we did this study that we're semi talking about now. And for some people, they just they felt that they were exclusive. They essentially felt that this could lead to a relationship, or like exactly like you said, they had their needs met, or they felt happy. But those people who are unhappy, well, why were you in this relationship that made you unhappy? And the idea is like, well, let's compare this to being single. Yeah, I'm not as happy in this relationship, but I was much worse off alone. I didn't want to go home and suck my thumb and eat ice cream. I wanted to hang out and do that with a partner. No, I'm just kidding. But doing something with somebody else, despite that clear label. I also wonder if this protects people from breakup. Like, oh, we weren't fully committed, so this ends, my ego's still intact. I'm like, oh, that was just a situationship. Well, I've talked to people who were in full-blown relationships by the traditional terms that you discussed. And after the breakup, they're like, oh, that was just a situationship, as if it was sort of like this protective mechanism. But I know you talk to a lot of people about relationships. I don't know if any of these experiences are consistent with some of the other people you talk to.
No, they are. I mean, there's something deeply human about doing something that isn't good for you and doing it anyway without making changes. We smoke, we drink, we eat unhealthy, we stay up all night binging Netflix, even though we got a big meeting at work the next day. I feel like this is just another example of people like not willing to make changes because they're scared of like rejection or scared of consequences. But by not making changes, they're in a bad situation.
It makes me wonder if this is a trend that we're going to see more of. Is this fear of commitment, or this insatiable desire to form a romantic relationship without going through the traditional process? Is that going to become more common? And I don't know, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. Is this something that we should be focusing more on, or is like maybe this is just a stage, we're going to get rid of this, those sort of things?
I don't know. I got to say the apps don't help, though. I mean, the current culture of dating really sets us up for this structure, doesn't it? Like the constant swiping, the constant curiosity of something better. 50, 60 years ago, there wasn't like the opportunity to say, oh, I'm not 100% in with my current partner. I'll go play the field. I mean, there's even an app called Field these days.
Yeah. We call it relation shopping, right?
Yeah.
You might be in something, and by being in a situationship, you open yourself up for opportunities to connect with others, or to, maybe get a higher quality partner.
Mickey, I've really enjoyed the chat. Thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, David. Anytime.
Dr. Mickey Langlais is an assistant professor of child and family studies at Baylor University. After the upcoming break, Varginha, Brazil, 1996. 3 young people spot a small, oily, red-eyed creature. The army rolls in. A sulfur smell hangs. A UFO crash, a cover-up, or one of the strangest mass misidentification cases ever will sort the alien facts from the alien folklore as we tell you all about the Varginha UFO incident.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Keep listening to The Last Show with David Cooper, because the alien invasion can wait. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Here's a classic UFO encounter from Brazil. A great introduction. It's Conspiracy Corner. We are joined by Professor of Conspiracy Studies, Nathan Radke, who hosts a podcast called The Uncover Up that's conspiracy theory themed.
It is. It 100% is.
This is not my best introduction, but in the 90s in Varginha, Brazil, there was a sighting of one or more unidentified flying objects, UAPs. And there was a lot of media coverage, and we are going to discuss just that incident. Welcome, Nathan, even though I've already talked to you, but now I'm welcoming you.
Yeah, I feel welcome.
I'm doing great today. 10 out of 10.
I mean, it's not your worst, not your best, but the important thing is that it's over and now we can move forward.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because there's a bizarre story and there's a explanation. And we are going to go through just that, because what better thing to cover in the evening than UFO sightings?
No, exactly. I mean, it is alien encounter story time, which is one of my favorite times in the entire day. So you mentioned that it's Varginha, Brazil. So it's in southern Brazil near the coast. So let's go back to January 20th, 1996. It's a stormy, blustery day. There's 2 teens and a young woman, and they're crossing a field in town during the rainstorm. And they see a figure crouched against a nearby wall. So they walk up to it, they approach it. And then one of the women gets a good look at it and screams when she sees this thing. Now, the noise of that woman screaming causes this creature, this being, to look up at them. And apparently, according to all 3 of these eyewitnesses, it was short and thin, it had smooth brown skin, red eyes, and bumps on its large head.
Oh.
So this thing was like scary AF, basically.
Was there anything more on it? Like, did it do anything? What happened with this creature, object, thing, alien, who knows what?
It looked up at them.
Oh.
And so obviously they ran home to tell the mother of 2 of the girls, and all of them then returned to the scene. Now the creature was gone, but the stench of ammonia remained in the area. And a construction worker nearby said that men in uniform, this is a classic part of any kind of like alien story, men in uniform had shown up and taken the creature away. And later on, other people came forward and said, you know what, I saw military vehicles in the area too. And again, common feature of UFO crash stories, from Aztec, New Mexico, to Roswell, to Kecksburg. And this story was picked up by local newspapers. Although looking at these papers, I noticed that the references were mostly to a devil rather than to an alien at this early stage. But after the story comes out, people come forward to say, hey, I'd seen this weird cigar or submarine shape craft in the sky. It appeared to be damaged. There was smoke coming out of it. And so then after this, another piece of this puzzle starts to circulate, because a story comes out that the U.S. Air Force had apparently detected a UFO when it descended into Earth's atmosphere and managed to hit the craft with several missiles. And then the American Air Force informed the Brazilian government, hey, we just shot something down. That stricken UFO is headed for your airspace.
So rumors start swirling at this point. More people are coming forward. The more they read about it, the more people are thinking there's something going on fishy. This is starting to become kind of a mess. Not panic, but...
Yeah, absolutely. And more parts start to add on to it. And the more parts that add on to it, the more the story seems like, wow, something really bizarre happened on that day. And then another aspect of the story shows up, that 2 police officers had apparently encountered the wounded alien. Now, one of the officers, Officer Marco Cherez, he was able to apprehend it. He was able to grab it, and he throws it into the back of his police car. However, according to the story, he wasn't wearing any kind of gloves or protective equipment when he came into contact with this creature, with this alien. And in the scuffle, it scratched him. Now, apparently, according to the story, Officer Cherez takes the creature to a local hospital where it dies later that night. And there were eyewitnesses who saw a body bag being taken into the hospital, and other people who swore they saw 2 small aliens in the hospital that night. But tragically, that alien who died, allegedly, wasn't the only casualty. Because even though that scratch was really small, really minor, just a tiny little wound, Officer Cherez needed to be taken to the hospital himself with some sort of rampant blood infection. And sadly, Officer Cherez dies a couple weeks after this encounter.
Okay, so this is where we're at in the story. Where are these reports coming from? Are they being reported in local papers? Are they rumors going around the small town? Like, how's this spreading?
A bit of both. There are some very early newspaper articles about this strange creature. And then once that article comes out, then other articles start to come out. And then there are a lot of rumors that are flying through the town. And then, of course, the ufologists, they show up and they start to get more and more stories, and more people come forward and say they have seen stranger and stranger things. And again, we've got the military driving around. We've got people in uniform. We've got strange small people in the hospital. We've got body bags. And we legitimately have the death of this police officer, because sadly, Marco Cherez does die of some kind of infection a couple weeks after this event.
So what's the explanation here? I mean, what is going on? What is this, like a mass, what is the word I'm looking for? Psychogenic illness where everyone's sort of getting everyone else worked up, and one report turns into 2, and hey, my neighbor saw a UFO, so these lights that I saw in the sky is a UFO. Hey, I heard a rumor that a cop died. Maybe it was an alien, and it all spreads and snowballs, or was there something else going on?
Well, I mean, it is an interesting story because we have a bunch of elements to it that we would want to have if we want to take a story seriously. We've got 3 eyewitnesses. Now, they were fairly young. The oldest was 21, and the youngest was 14. But we do have 3 eyewitnesses who did see something, and they've been telling the story for 20 years, and they continue telling the same story. We do have, fairly reasonable reports that, yes, there was military activity in the area. We have other, hospital reports that say, yes, this officer did die. And so, on the one hand, we appear to have what seems to be pretty robust. These are the things that are always missing out from this kind of story. It's all a bunch of, oh, I heard this rumor, I heard that rumor. But this seems to have all of the pieces that we need to maybe say, okay, do we have here an actual example of some kind of strange UFO alien encounter? And you can see why this has captured the attention not only of the people in town, because, I mean, since then, Virginia has gone full-blown UFO. They've got a water tower shaped like a flying saucer. They've got bus stops that are shaped like UFOs. They're heavily leaning in. But also, ufologists from all over the world have come to this small town. There was recently a documentary that came out a couple years ago, which basically makes the argument that, yep, this is it. This is the thing that we've been waiting for. This is all of the evidence that we finally need. So at first, it seems like it's pretty exciting and pretty, open and shut.
Maybe, but 3 people telling the same story, even if those beliefs were sincerely held, could have been mistaken. Militaries make movements. Sometimes people die of blood infections, and it doesn't mean they were scratched by an alien beast. It's not compelling enough evidence for me, even if those facts are true, those 3 things in and of itself. Is it compelling enough for you?
I mean, it's compelling. It's compelling as an example of how a myth can be created. And so now that we've told the story, here's what I recommend we do. Let's go back and look at the elements again, but we'll look at them from a different perspective and see if there's maybe some other kind of explanation for what happened in Varginha that doesn't require us to believe that the Americans shot down a cigar-shaped UFO and that it crashed into Brazil.
Hey, Nathan, this is my show. I'll make the agenda. After the break, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go back and look at these elements again from a different perspective and see if there's maybe some other kind of explanation for what happened in Varginha that doesn't require us to believe that the Americans shot down a cigar-shaped UFO and that it crashed into Brazil. I like my idea better.
Hey, this is why you're the host, man.
We're here with Nathan Radke talking about the Varginha UFO incident that happened in Brazil. We're going to take a look at it from a more skeptical point of view to see how stories can be told and populations can get worked up over UFO sightings. Great. Killing it today.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Broadcasting intimate details and useless information from an undisclosed location in New York City. The Last Show with David Cooper.
We are discussing the Varginha incident where some people saw a strange creature, there was UFOs involved, a police officer was maybe scratched by an alien and died of blood poisoning, the military was involved, and this all happened in Brazil. We are here with Nathan Radke. It is Conspiracy Corner. Check out Nathan Radke's podcast, The Uncover Up. It's a great podcast, and Nathan is a professor of conspiracy studies at Humber Polytechnic. I think I got all the pertinent details there.
Yeah, you totally nailed it.
Welcome back, Nathan.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
So before the break, we kind of told the story from the angle of, oh, it's a strange UFO event. We are going to look at it from the angle of how UFO myths can form and how local authorities and local towns can take advantage of a publicity event, I guess.
Well, I mean, this is sort of a classic mistake that we make when we get all conspiratorial, is that a bunch of stuff happens and we ask ourselves, what is the cause of all of this stuff? And because there's so much stuff happening, the cause has got to be pretty big and pretty weird. But the truth of the matter is, often we're asking the wrong question. It isn't what is the cause of all this stuff. It is what are the causes of all of these different things? Rather than having one big weird cause, often there's just a bunch of little normal causes.
Let's start with this eyewitness account. I believe it was 3 young people seeing some sort of weird feral brown, maybe, beast that they thought first was a devil, later got reported as an alien. What could be a plausible explanation for that?
Well, I mean, this was taken seriously enough. This was a big enough event that the Brazilian government actually launched an investigation into this incident. And as you would expect, they ended up with a very different version of events than the one that emerged in the UFO community. So according to this investigation, which made a report 350 pages long, there were non-alien explanations. So firstly, and most importantly, there was an alternative explanation for that incident that sparked the entire story, the crouching alien. Because according to the report, there was an unhoused man in the area named Luiz Antonio de Paula. He was nicknamed Madinho by the locals. And he used to, and this is going to sound familiar having heard the story, used to spend a lot of time crouching on the ground to pick up cigarette butts.
Mm.
And so when the girls were interviewed immediately after the event, they said that they didn't know Madinho, which means that it's possible that they saw him and mistook him for an alien. When they were interviewed like decades later, they said, no, that isn't possible. We knew Madinho very well. We were very familiar with him. But that's a thing that happens with stories over the years, is that they will change to protect themselves. It doesn't mean that these girls are lying. It means that memories are faulty, and we tend to change things in the memories so that it fits in with the narratives that we have accepted.
I feel like we all have stories like that we've told once, or that there's some great lesson from it, or there's some great event that happens. And the more we tell it, the more we're playing into the lesson or the event and less of the actual facts of the story. Happens with family lore. You know, there's stories from my childhood that I've told so many times that who knows if they're even true anymore. Is it something like that?
Yeah, exactly. And if you have other people and you're all telling the same story, then you'd think, okay, there's more eyewitnesses and that's just going to reinforce the truth of it. But what actually happens is if you have a bunch of people telling the same story, what they can do is they can reinforce the false memories. And again, it's not lying. It's not them deliberately trying to mislead anybody. It's just a natural thing that happens with stories and memory. So we do have an explanation for that first setting. What was this creature? This creature was a human being. There's also no evidence at all for any of those Air Force claims. Those showed up afterwards. And also, it doesn't make a ton of sense that a craft gets shot down in American airspace and then crashes in southern Brazil. In addition, there was no physical evidence of a crash site. Again, we have all sorts of stories about how it was hushed up, but it's a lot harder to hush something like that up than you would think. Like, as humans, we are bad at hush-ups. We're bad at keeping secrets. There would have had to have been a ton of people who were involved in a cover-up like that. And of course, the more people who are involved, especially just, low-level soldiers and things like that, the greater the chance that somebody's going to go out to the bar, get drunk, and start telling these stories.
But how can you possibly explain Brazilian military movements in the area? Militaries don't just move, right? They just stay on their base, right? Is that?
Yeah, of course. Famously, militaries never go anywhere. Well, apparently the military trucks were there in town for routine maintenance. This wasn't an unusual occurrence. This is something that happened fairly commonly. If you just sort of picked any kind of random day, there's going to be a reasonable chance that, you're going to see a couple army trucks moving through the area. But it becomes an unusual occurrence when the alien story starts to spread, because then that reframes ordinary things into an unusual light. And so you wouldn't notice these army trucks driving around, but then when somebody says, hey, the government's covering up some kind of weird alien stuff, all of a sudden those army trucks, which seemed super normal before, now they seem super weird, maybe a little sinister.
But how can you explain the additional reports of UFOs afterward? I mean, you couldn't possibly make the claim that the public were primed to explain any light in the sky as a UFO after hearing all these stories. That couldn't be an explanation.
No, of course not, except, of course, yes. And this is, again, a very human thing. It doesn't require people to lie. It doesn't require people to be pulling some kind of a scam, although, unfortunately, that does often feature in some of these UFO sightings. But good, honest people can see stuff in the sky that they don't recognize, and then all of a sudden they start hearing stories, and then those stories, they start to snowball and they start to spiral, and then all of a sudden those flickering lights that you saw take on an entirely new meaning. And because we're not as good at perceiving things as we think, and because we're not as good at remembering things as we think, it's just the easiest thing in the world for like an innocuous sighting to turn into something way more complicated and way more strange.
So what can these collection of events with plausible explanations and a Brazilian government investigation that says it probably wasn't an alien? My alternative theory is it was a capybara, but that's a discussion for another time. I love capybaras. They are wonderful creatures. What can this say about how these myths form and how the public can start to believe them, and then maybe a town can profit off them? Because I know the town did some UFO-themed architecture, which brought in tourism and such.
Oh, yeah, they absolutely did, and you can't blame them for it. I mean, it does show you that we can start to connect events that aren't necessarily connected. The body bag, for example, that people saw being brought into the hospital, it was a corpse from an unrelated murder investigation. The two aliens that were seen at the hospital, they were just a couple of short humans who were there to have a baby.
Rude. I'm short.
Even shorter than you.
Oh, thank God. And then the cop who died of blood poisoning or whatever?
Yeah, he really did die. Officer Cherez, he did die a few weeks after the incident, but there was nothing tying him to that alleged alien. He had been suffering from a cyst under his armpit, and before the incident occurred, he had already had a surgery booked to have it removed, and after the surgery, he contracted an infection and died of septicemia. But the story that he was involved in any way, it didn't show up until after he had died. And so it wasn't like people at the time were saying, oh, Officer Cherez has been involved with this alien, and then he died. He died, and then people said this must have something to do with this greater story that we've been talking about. It's an excellent example of how stories like a rolling snowball, it grows and it picks up stray bits of things as it rolls down the hill. Things don't seem strange at the time, and then they seem strange in retrospect. And I think maybe one of the most important lessons to this story is that you don't need a liar to have a lie.
Wow. I like that. I'm sorry. I've just silence after that. That's a great phrase. That's the thing. I think these beliefs are probably sincerely held by a lot of people, and that doesn't mean they're true.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so it's why, again, we should always be more sympathetic to people who come out with strange stories. We shouldn't immediately assume that they are, trying to scam us or whatever. They could just be genuinely mistaken. Or maybe there was an alien in that town on that day, although it seems like the less likely explanation.
Well, the less likely explanation is always the best explanation, said nobody ever. Nathan Radke, check out his podcast, The Uncover Up Conspiracy Cast. Nathan joins us for Conspiracy Corner. Nathan Radke, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Ever notice how schools seem to call mom first? Up next, the default parent problem. Why moms seem to always get cast, why dads seem to get sidelines, and how to flip that script at home and in public. Plus, an answer to the asinine question to mom, who's watching the baby? Dad! And stop asking that question. That discussion in just a few moments.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The show that asks the questions other shows are afraid to ask. The Last Show with David Cooper.
She had a kid and kept getting asked, who's watching the baby? As if the father were a unicorn. Our guest wrote about being cast as the default parent and the invisible math of caregiving and how policies and habits keep it that way. Let's question this script, maybe share a better one. I'm here with Alli Kushner, who recently wrote about this in Business Insider. Alli, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, David.
How many times did you get asked, who's watching the baby, before it stopped being funny and you're like, what the you know what? There's a dad out there who's able to do that task.
I didn't actually keep count, but it was enough times for me to question, is this person trying to be funny? Is it, what is happening here? And I very quickly realized that whether we like it or not, subconsciously, we have opinions, we have thoughts on who the primary parent is, what our roles are once we become a caregiver. And in my situation, I just very quickly came up that I was expected once a baby came out of my body that I was automatically going to be, that was the be all end all of my life. I was now the caregiver, heart stop. And the first time it happened, I was confused. And the more often it happened, I just got angry, to be quite honest.
I mean, that seems like a reasonable response. There are setups where the husband or the man's the primary caregiver. There's setups where it's equally shared. This idea that the mom should be asked that question really presupposes or assumes a lot of things, and some of them are kind of ugly.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know I live in New York City. I know a lot of men who are the primary caregivers. They're stay-at-home dads, and also for them, it's kind of a slap in the face. Or any partner in a heterosexual relationship, any man who takes on any caregiving responsibility, it's neglecting the important role that they play, and it's telling them that they're not important without actually saying those words. So it's doing a disservice to everyone, both the caregivers and the kids, ultimately.
This notion of a default parent, in your words, what is that, and what would be some telltale signs to a person that you're in fact that parent, even if it's the father?
So default parent, who is calling from daycare or from school? Who does the doctor's office call? Who's the first person on that call sheet? Or when you show up at a doctor's office, who is the doctor talking to? So if you're in a room with a nurse or a doctor and both parents are there, again, a heterosexual couple, are they addressing both parents? Are they addressing just the mom, just the dad? When someone goes to make a play date at the playground, are they going to go up to a dad and say, hey, our kids are really getting along, should we set up a time to get together? Or will they only do that for a mother? These are all instances. And again, it's about the comfort level that people feel. And I don't want to say that this is super easy. It's definitely nuanced. But these are some telltale situations that it often happens in.
I want us to talk about one of the things I find ugly, that this idea that moms are naturally better at this, or moms should be doing this, or moms are the default parent.
Oh, God, no.
One of the ugly things is some moms struggle after birth with health issues, with postpartum depression, and that really doesn't leave room for the father to be, assumed to be doing these things, which he should be. Mm-hmm. What do you say to someone who kind of just thinks that moms are better at this, therefore they should do it?
Absolutely not. And I'm one of those people. I'm one of the statistics. I actually wrote about my postpartum depression journey for the New York Times back in Mother's Day for the Modern Love column. And when I gave birth to my oldest daughter, I spiraled. I had the baby blues. It went on to a very severe case of postpartum depression. And I didn't want to be around my daughter. And I felt like I had made a mistake. It wasn't just about not knowing how to change a diaper. It was that intrinsic connection, wanting to be around her, to spend time. And I felt like my husband won the lottery, that it was just very natural from my perspective looking at him. And there are so many different things that happen when you have a child, no matter how you welcome that baby into your family, that you can't possibly imagine or prepare for. And we're all wired differently. We deal with all of these different shifts. And it's important to just recognize that we're all coming at it from a different perspective. We bring different skills and gifts to the table. And for many of us who are in relationships with children, having children, we hopefully complement each other. One person doesn't do it all. And it's not necessarily 50-50 every single day, but you balance each other. It's that yin and yang, hopefully.
I'm sorry you went through that, and thank you for sharing it on the show. Let's do a language check.
Oh, boy.
This idea, tonight is dad babysitting? Like somehow that, it's a chore for dad to be looking after kids, but if mom's taking care of the kid, it's not framed as babysitting. Is there a problem with using this language? And I know the way I framed the question, the answer is yes.
Yes, absolutely. There's a problem with it. I'm not giving my husband money for an Uber home to a different house or money for pizza. If he's watching our child, it's our child. It is our mutual responsibility for that kid's upbringing and their safety and taking care of them. And interestingly enough, one of the things that really upset me in this whole default parent situation, it wasn't just that I was asked who's watching the kid and then kind of a side eye when, I was going out and I said, oh, my husband's watching. Like, obviously my kid has a dad who's perfectly capable of taking care of her. But it was the follow-up that people would often say, oh, what a good father.
As if he's sort of like, this great person.
Yeah.
Like he's getting a participation award, basically.
The bar was so low, I tripped over it, essentially. And, it's interesting. Again, like, these are social norms from many, many years ago. And a lot of it, none of it is meant maliciously, I don't think. But it's how we change our perspective, that if we want, men to contribute to raising the next generation, we have to change our language around it, because many of them are already doing it and they're doing a kick-ass job at it. And not recognizing it is just a disservice to them. It hurts mothers. And again, it hurts the kids, because then you're being brought up, taught that, oh, my dad watching me, that's an amazing thing. He's going above and beyond because he's not out golfing or he's not doing work. But when mom does it, that's just an expectation. It's like, no, you have a kid. This is the expectation when you have a child, regardless of if you're the mom or the dad or whatever.
Media, marketing, TV shows, they often make dads look incompetent.
They're not.
As if it's some sort of joke. What trope would you ban, or what portrayal would you think should happen less in media?
God. So my favorite one is that a dad can't figure out if a diaper is on correctly. I think back to the Full House episode, and I don't know how many people watched that back in the 90s, where there were three men who were raising this baby. There was an interesting situation with childcare. One was the uncle, one was the friend, one was the dad, and they couldn't figure out how to put on the diaper. And they wind up like wrapping this kid in paper towels, and they're spraying the kid at the kitchen sink. And it's like, yes, was it funny? Absolutely. Is that reality? No. Can a dad tell whether or not a diaper is more absorbent than another one? Yes. It's not just mom approved. So
it's not rocket surgery, as no one has ever said.
It's not.
What say you to people who are still framing things this way, assuming their coworkers and their friends, that the mom should be the primary caregiver, that sort of thing, and the language they use and the questions they ask and the things they say? What would you say to someone who's still doing that?
Look, I don't want to feel like I'm riding in on my high horse. There are so many things in this world that I don't have the right language for, and I don't necessarily approach with the utmost care. But it's really just about putting ourselves in someone else's shoes, having a different perspective. It's about, I have an opinion. I grew up thinking that certain cars were not the right cars to drive because back in the 70s when my dad bought cars, he had very strong opinions. And I had those opinions just because they were passed on to me. And it's the same thing kind of with how we do everything in the world, that things evolve. We learn new things, society adapts. And so questioning your own beliefs and your own way of thinking about things, I think it's just a good check for all of us in every aspect, especially when it comes to caregiving. And it's not just about kids, it's also about the sandwich generation, caring for elder parents or a significant other or somebody else in your family that you become the caregiver for. That there are all these unique situations where who is the default? Who's expected? Is it the daughter who's expected to be the default caregiver for her aging parents? Or, do she and her brother share that load?
You can find Alli's article, As a Mom, Society Expects Me to Be the Default Parent. My husband is just as capable as I am, in Business Insider. Search for Alli Kushner on LinkedIn, where you can find her writings. Alli, thank you for joining me. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Up next, a real live alien who does tarot readings. It's exactly what this show needs. She's a street performer, and you're going to get such a kick out of her.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Broadcasting from the intersection of chaos and more chaos. The last show with David Cooper.
She's a street performer. She's an alien. Her name is Alien. She does tarot readings. She's a performance artist. She sabotages the ordinary from perhaps a different planet, a different timeline, maybe your best timeline. Her name is Alien Toronto. Some people call her Olga. Alien, welcome to the show.
Greetings, Cosmic Citizen. I'm so happy to hear the sound of your meaty vibrations over the radio waves. They're much more pleasant than the real deal, honestly.
When you say meaty, you know what? Don't answer that question. It wasn't a question. Tell me about yourself. You are a performer. You have an alien head. Maybe it's a mask. Maybe it's covering not your face. I don't know. Tell me about what you do.
Well, darling, that's my face, sir. First of all,
Rude.
I'm from the planet Glamtron, and I am here to get everyone inside of Toronto inside of their best timeline. GTA included. If you're not in Toronto, I'll let it slide.
Okay, well, good. The show does air in places that aren't Toronto, but for the purposes of our conversation, your alien services are best performed there. You are like a really fun, quirky street performer. What are some of the things that you like to do when you're messing with people in public or just being yourself in public?
Oh my goodness. Well, my favorite thing about the whole idea of this psychic reader, of this fortune teller, is of course the gaslighting that comes with it. You see, the second you sit down at my table, I'm not just going to say, "Oh, hi, what do you want?" I'm going to be like, "Oh, it's you. I've been waiting for you. You're late." So by the time you sit down, you're already like, wait, what's happening? In fact, I really enjoy messing with people just in this way because honestly, we all know each other. I feel like we walk down the street and we're always assuming a bunch of information. And I don't just feel that way. That's just human psychology. That's how we keep it alive.
Yeah, I am myself. I mean, you're not wearing an alien mask. That is your face that we've just discovered. But I'm like you. I just talk to strangers all the time, and my girlfriend can't stand it. My friends can't stand it. I don't really have that many friends, probably because of it. But yeah, why don't we interact with strangers on the street more? We do all know each other, don't we?
We truly do. I think the reason we don't ever want to talk to literally anyone is because when you do, they get to look at you. And then you have to look at them looking at you. And all of a sudden, you were having a fine old day judging them. Now you're wondering if they're judging you back. And that's part of the reason why my face looks like that, darling. I am going to give you the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to sit down and be absolutely not seen. Okay? You can't see me looking at you. You can't. No. You can't see through my eyes. My soul is obscured. And so you get to be real honest for a second and not have to worry, what is this super cool alien looking and thinking about me? You know?
It's kind of oddly what I like about radio. Like I've got these people, guests on my show, and for 10 minutes, like all the barriers are dropped because they're not like, I think that's one of the reasons we don't interact with people on the street. We're worried that like they're going to unload something on us. Like I talked to the guy on the subway train and then he starts telling me about all his problems and it's like, oh no, I'm stuck here because I started talking to him. But you know, in certain interactions with you wearing not your mask, your face, with me being on the radio, just the boundaries drop for just a brief second there. And it's kind of nice, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And especially, it's nice for you all humans out there because in real life, should I be wearing my disgusting flesh face? I'm really quite mean. As a woman, I've noticed that, you know, being kind to strangers is really not in your favor. Do not do that. That is, no grown man is ever asking you for directions, honey. Like, he doesn't need them. He's got ulterior motives.
I hear that.
Yeah.
No man is actually ever lost. He'll never admit that, probably.
No. And the thing is, too, like, get in a car with him, try to go on a road trip, then he's never lost. He's only lost in the middle of broad daylight when you're, like, looking adorable. That's when he gets lost. In your eyes, probably, honestly.
Can we try a reading? I am skeptical of tarot readings, but a good friend of mine does them. And, you know, I can approach this with an open mind if you're willing to attempt to read me.
Oh, absolutely. But darling, I'm going to have to go ahead and disappoint you. At the end of this tarot reading, you're still going to be able to claim I've never had a tarot reading.
Perfect.
I absolutely do not believe in psychics because you know why? You have agency over your life. Oh, dang. Did I just tell you were going to win $1 million? Well, you decided to go home and eat chips. So boo-hoo to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm never going to play the lottery, so I'm never going to win. I hear that. This idea that someone deals the cards and then you have no autonomy over the choices you make, you're going to fall victim to whatever outcome gets described to you. I do think we have control of our own lives.
I feel even worse with tarot specifically. The number one question is, does he love me? What does he think about me? How come he's not calling me? And the thing is, tarot is so much more powerful than that. Honestly, Kevin doesn't like you. That's the explanation number one. If you're coming to Alien Toronto for a tarot reading about your boyfriend and your boyfriend isn't here, dump your boyfriend. Yeah.
Classic Kevin. Classic Kevin.
Free advice.
Let's try this. I mean, why not? You got the cards in front of you?
I sure do, but before we get started, I'm so sorry, but I must reveal to you 2 cosmic space rules that the Space Council does not want you all to know. Is that okay?
Oh, please.
Okay, so number 1, Mariah Carey is right. Time is not real. Okay, memories, your memories. You remember high school? Yeah, that trauma lives inside your heart. You can go back to it at any time if you wanted to, but why would you want to? Number 2, your actions are the only thing that matter in the entire universe for you. For example, if you walk into the lake, you're going to be wet. So with that in mind, I'm not a tarot reader. I'm an alien tarot reader. I'm not going to be telling you your future because you have full agency over your life, as I said. Let's do something a little bit more realistic. Let's time travel to your best timeline and ask that person what they did to get there. You want to hop into your best timeline?
Wouldn't it be dimension travel to the other dimension, or is it maybe time and dimension? Sure, let's go. I'm with you. Let's hop in the spacecraft and do it.
Excellent. So, my darling. Excellent. So, my love, I must ask you the ultimate question, which is, if nothing was off the table and everything was possible, you could be Beyonce tomorrow. What would you want in your best timeline?
I would probably do something very similar to what I'm doing now, because I think it's more about the journey than the destination. Like, I enjoy what I do. Would I want more radio stations to carry my show and maybe have a TV show and get really compelling guests like you, Alien? Yeah, I would kind of dial it up.
You want to blow up. You want to explode, don't you?
Well, I enjoy doing the work more than I would enjoy blowing up. But yeah, sure, why not? Let's throw in blowing up.
Okay. No, I like the work approach too, darling. I'm such a hard worker that I so respect hard working and being able to hard work in a lot more places. Oh, let's get you there.
All right.
Let's get you hard working in everywhere. Now, so the only way I'm going to be able to get that for you done today is I'm going to get you to go and time travel back in time. You are going to have to time travel into the moment where last you were most excited. And you know when that moment was? That moment was when you woke up and you were like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be Alien Toronto interviewing today. So close your eyes and I'm going to start shuffling. When you tell me to stop, I'm going to pull a card and then we're going to know exactly how to get you working all the time and stuff you really want to do.
Stop.
All right. You got the sun, friend. Okay. Now listen, friend. This is huge. The sun means that you are actually in a little bit of a pickle. You have way too much luck. Your luck is actually pretty epic, which means the person who's like, oh no, I've lost my one shot. That's not you, because your one shot is actually your second shot, your third shot, and your fourth shot. Approach this with the understanding that you are so lucky. It's impossible for you to lose. And if you do that, well, you're going to blow up so hard and be working forever. That is your message from the universe.
Thank you for relaying that message. You know, if you keep on trying, eventually something will stick, right?
Not just that, you specifically, friend, you have a lot of luck, which means that a lot of people will keep trying and they're going to fail. But not you. You're just going to keep getting random shots to try again. It's madness, and the universe recognizes that inside of you.
You can find Olga or Alien Toronto at zerolga.ca. Alien, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you.
Pleasure was all mine. Goodbye.
Do babies get calm faster when held versus when in their strollers? Up next, a neuroscientist explains just that.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The only talk show with an introduction that mentions its own introduction. And that's happening right now in this introduction. The last show with David Cooper.
Begging for a mention. Yeah, you just want attention.
How does body-to-body contact, warmth, heartbeat, motion change an infant's stress response? A new study shows babies calm faster in a chest carrier than a stroller. So does being held closely really help us as young kids? I'm here with a cognitive neuroscientist who studied this topic at Radboud University Medical Center. Her name is Dr. Nicole Rheinheimer. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me again. I'm very excited to talk about these results of this study. A lot of work went into it, a lot of challenges, and I'm very happy that we can now finally share the findings with your listeners.
What question were you trying to answer with your study? Like you gave children a mock bath as a stressor and then tried to see how they responded to it.
Yeah, exactly. So this study started with a whole different kind of a setup. When I started my PhD, we actually had the idea of helping kindergarten teachers to reduce stress in their infants, because in the Netherlands, when they are 3 months old, the babies start with daycare. So that's the first time they are separated from their parents. It's very stressful. And my PhD was about trying to reduce their stress. So we wanted to introduce this new project sort of by inviting students to daycare centers and cuddle with the babies and see whether that reduces their stress hormones. But then COVID happened and we were not allowed to enter the daycare centers, and it all became very challenging. It was a very tough period of my PhD, and we had to come up with something completely new and completely COVID-proof. So we had to be a little bit creative, and we thought of this idea that, well, you can always go outdoors. Even during COVID in the Netherlands, it was allowed to go to the forest. It's something nobody can actually just take away from you in the Netherlands, that is. So we came up with this new study where we invited parents with their babies to the lab and asked them to go outdoors, either by holding the baby close or by having the baby in a pram. And that was what the study was about.
Interesting. So what were you hoping to learn about having a baby in a pram or a stroller versus being held closely by the parent?
Well, there are so many debates in how to best suit the baby. Many people say you should just walk around with them. Others say you shouldn't spoil them. There's even people who say you should let the baby cry it out in a pram on their own so they would learn and they would calm down quicker. And we just wanted to prove this point, sort of that being outdoors and being close with your parent can help reduce stress the best, let's say. And we also wanted to see whether a short walk outdoors is already enough to have an effect on the baby or maybe even the mother.
And what effects did you end up finding? And was there much difference between having your infant with you in a pram or a stroller and versus being held closely?
Oh, there was, yeah. We found a lot of things that we actually had expected due to all these anecdotes that you hear, but also some surprising things. So, first off, we found that when the mothers took the baby outdoors, no matter whether they had them in their pram or holding them in the carrier, we found that the baby slept much more minutes. That was kind of predictable, because you walk. If your baby cries, you walk. But we didn't expect that they would just fall asleep so quickly. Just the minute they went outdoors, they fell asleep and they slept sort of 20 minutes longer than the babies who stayed indoors in the pram. But we also found that the stress levels in the babies who were held by the mother compared to being the pram decreased. And we specifically looked at the hormone cortisol, which indicates how aroused the baby is, how much they might have cried. And what was interesting also, it didn't really matter whether they were indoors or outdoors, just being held on the mother's chest close had an effect on the baby. And then we also found a similar effect on the mothers. That was very nice to see, that the mothers also benefit from holding the baby close. Especially if you consider that the postpartum period is very stressful for mothers. Like we know that cortisol in general rises during the postpartum period, and mothers have a lot of anxieties, mothers and fathers, by the way. So it was nice to see that this 30 minutes of holding the baby already was enough to have an effect on their cortisol levels.
For both of them, how do you measure cortisol? Like, is it through saliva, through blood, how do you actually chart this out?
Well, the most ideal, if you would think like a hardcore scientist, your preferable way would be to look at the blood, because you immediately see if the cortisol spikes. But we have to find something not so invasive, right? Because we are doing this study with a lot of babies in the daily life outdoors. So we have this easier method by just swabbing the baby's saliva in the mouth with a little eye sponge, sort of it's something that doctors use to take eye to swab eyes. It's a really tiny thing that you just like a lollipop that you just put in the mouth, and the babies usually don't mind.
Now, you observed the chemical kind of dropping cortisol when the babies were held versus being in the stroller. But what did you observe like visually? Like, did they seem more relaxed? Did the parents seem more relaxed? What did the parents report, and what did you observe in the babies?
Yeah, so we wanted to have something very objective, because mothers might be biased by knowing that they had been outdoors. They might think, well, the baby was very calm. So we want something very objective. That's why we looked at the cortisol. But if I think back to the time when the parents came back from walk, they would say it was really nice. It was very lovely. They would just talk very positively about the study. And the mothers indoors, they would sort of just nap, or the baby would keep crying, and they were a little bit more busy with soothing the baby than the mothers who were outdoors. So subjectively, I would say the babies also cried less, but we didn't really measure that.
I know you didn't test for this, but would it be a stretch to say that being held as adults, for example, if me and my girlfriend hugged for 30 minutes or something, that might have a calming effect on us? Being held as people versus being just next to our loved ones would have a calming effect?
I think it might have. I'm almost sure. I haven't tested it, so as a researcher, I can't say it definitely would have, but I think it might have. And there might also be studies in adults whether close body contact can also reduce stress. We do know in babies also that if you put the baby on your chest, and that now is about fathers and mothers, that it can reduce the cortisol levels also of the mother and father and the baby as well.
Is the big parenting takeaway here for parents with infants to get like a baby Bjorn or get a carrier that holds them against their chest versus using a stroller when possible?
Yeah, I would say when possible, definitely try it out. Of course, it's not accessible to every mother. Maybe they have like sort of hip issues, or maybe the baby has issues through which they can't be carried. But if it's possible, I would definitely try it out. I have heard from some babies who might not like it as much, but in general, the 100 mothers we invited, or at least the 50 who were in the carrier condition, they all seem to enjoy it. So I think definitely try it out. And I think one big advice is also that I always like to tell people, you don't have to spend a lot of money. It doesn't have to be super complicated or expensive. Sometimes it's just enough to step outside, go for a walk, and hold your baby close.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes people fixate on getting the best gadgets, the best strollers, the best harnesses, the best straps, and that's not what it's about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I heard of a lot of devices that try to soothe the baby by electronically rocking the baby or measuring all kinds of things. But in this study, we really try to find something that is very accessible to most parents.
Any other areas or any other things from this research you would want to share with people?
I think one more thing that's still important to mention is that the forest that we used for the study was very calm and relaxing, and we were in an environment in the Netherlands where there's not a very high crime rate. So of course we have to be aware that maybe it's not as accessible to everybody in the world right now. And I would really like to do this study again in different environments, right? More urban environments, parks, maybe the garden. So I think there's still a lot of stuff to be done on this topic.
Thanks for sharing your research with me, Nicole. I appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Dr. Nicole Rheinheimer is a cognitive neuroscientist who did this research at Radboud University Medical Center in the Netherlands. Don't forget our show available as a podcast. Head to www.lastshow.pizza. That's lastshow.pizza, not .com. There you can find out more details of said podcast, including how to subscribe, or just search David Cooper Last Show on your favorite podcast app. I'm sure it'll come up. So there's 2 ways to find the show as a podcast. Boom! That's our Monday night show. Thanks so much for listening to it. If you've got any questions, any feedback, anything you'd like to tell us, a pitch for what we should cover on this show, or just tips on how to dehook your fish after you've caught it, I believe that's called degorging, send me an email. My address, david@lastshow.pizza. That's david@lastshow.pizza. I am David Cooper. This was The Last Show. We'll be back tomorrow night.
Well, you've heard me on the radio and you've listened to my podcast. Well, now you can watch me on YouTube for thought-provoking conversation, fearless interviews that you won't get anywhere else. The Ben Mulroney Show every single day. So go to YouTube, subscribe to The Ben Mulroney Show, and never miss an episode.